The German invasion of Norway relied on them achieving air superiority to secure their supply lines across the Sakura Strait and to prevent interference from the Royal Navy. To this end, the occupation of Denmark was deemed necessary. In particular, the capture of Orbor airport. In the early hours of April the 9th, German troops crossed the Danish border, and soon their paratroops had captured the airport, while German troops disembarked from the docks in Copenhagen to occupy the Danish capital. With their small, poorly equipped army and air force overrun, the Danish King Christiansen chose to surrender, believing that further resistance would only result in the unnecessary loss of Danish lives. Once the full extent of the German landings had become known to the British, and with the location of 2 German battleships still unknown, the British Home Fleet chose to concentrate on nearby Bergen. However, on receiving reports of stronger German forces than expected, and fearing that the Germans might be controlling the shore defences, as well as their overwhelming air superiority, the Royal Navy decided to leave the defence of southern Norwegian waters to their submarines and the RAF, while their surface vessels concentrated in the north. Meanwhile, the British Admiralty had been informed that a single German destroyer was at Narvik, and dispatched a flotilla of 5 destroyers to engage. The British planned to attack at high water at dawn the next day, giving them the element of surprise and some protection against mines. The Germans in fact had 5 destroyers at Narvik. Early the following morning, the British destroyers began their attack. Both the fog and the snow were extremely heavy, allowing the British force to approach undetected. As soon as they found the German ships, the British opened fire, starting the first Battle of Narvik. The British managed to sink 2 German destroyers and cripple 1 more, along with sinking 6 tankers and supply ships. However, the British were surprised by other German destroyers who were hidden in fjords near Narvik, resulting in the loss of 2 British destroyers and another suffering heavy damage. The Germans began their ground campaign using paratroopers to capture the airfield at Sold, near Stavanger, although they were met with resistance from Norwegian troops, resulting in heavy German casualties. On the 9th of April, following the capture of Kristiansand, the Germans moved to secure the areas surrounding the city. Meanwhile, on the same day, the Germans captured the cities of Bergen and Stavanger. However, despite losing these cities, the Norwegians managed to mobilise the 6,000-strong 4th Division around the town of Voss. On April the 10th, the Norwegian army appointed General Otto Rug as their commanding general. Rug mobilised his forces around Oslo, Bergen, Trondheim and Narvik, planning a counterattack around Oslo to give the Allies enough time to recapture Trondheim and prevent a German link-up. Meanwhile, German reinforcements began to arrive from Denmark, pushing the Norwegians northwards. As the Germans advanced, the fighting intensified, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. On the morning of the 13th of April, the British Navy returned to Narvik, this time with 4 modern destroyers and the battleship Warspite. Both sides initially found to inflict significant damage. However, as the battle continued, the German ships began to run low on ammunition and were gradually pushed back further up the field. With the Germans now running low on fuel as well as ammunition, the German crews were forced to abandon and scuttle their ships. And by early evening, the British ships made their way out of the now cleared field. On the 13th and 14th of April, 3,000 troops of the Norwegian 1st Division at Østfold deserted across the Swedish border and were interned by the Swedes. On the 14th of April, poorly trained and equipped British troops, commanded by General Mackesay, arrived north of Narvik at Harstead and made preparations to lay siege to Narvik. Meanwhile, the German force at Narvik, expecting an immediate British attack, quickly reinforced their position, being supplied by air. On the 16th of April, a British brigade named Morris Force landed north of Trondheim at Namsos. The next day, they advanced southwards to link up with Norwegian forces. On the 19th of April, a French brigade arrived at Namsos, which was attacked by the German Luftwaffe the next day, who destroyed a large amount of Allied equipment in the process. Meanwhile, constant German air attacks prevented the Allies from conducting an advance towards Trondheim. On the 21st of April, the German force from Trondheim attacked the Allies, forcing Morris Force to fall back towards Namsos, where they were evacuated. Norwegian military resistance in central and southern Norway ceased on May the 5th. At the same time, a smaller British force named Sickle Force, which again was poorly trained and equipped, landed south of Trondheim at Andersnes, and by the 20th of April they had linked up with the Norwegian forces near the town of Lillehammer. Following a series of engagements, on the 21st of April, the British and Norwegian forces were slowly pushed back northwards and began to break up into smaller parties, some heading back towards Andersnes via the forests and mountains, while others headed towards Sweden. However, many were captured by the Germans. While on the same day, the 15th British Brigade landed at Andersnes. They were better equipped with anti-tank guns, mortars and anti-aircraft guns. They managed to delay the German advance for 2 days during the heavy fighting at the Battle of Kvarn on the 25th and 26th of April, after which the British continued to conduct a fighting retreat. By the 28th of April, the Allied leadership decided to withdraw all British and French forces from southern and central Norway. On April the 30th, the German forces from Oslo and those at Trondheim linked up. Sickle Force evacuated from Aldersnes in the early hours of May the 2nd, only a few hours before the Germans captured the port. The Allied retreat was covered by aircraft from the Royal Navy, as well as Norwegian forces. However, with the Royal Navy having no capacity to evacuate Norwegian troops, Rug boarded a Norwegian ship and headed north towards Narvik. After the Allied failures in central and southern Norway, their northern forces were significantly reinforced with troops and equipment, and air cover was provided by squadrons of land and carrier-based fighters. Both the British and French governments were eager for an attack on Narvik to take place before the German forces could be reinforced by forces en route from central Norway. On the 4th of May, a British force landed south of Narvik to delay any German advance from central Norway. However, advancing German troops swept around this British force and headed towards Narvik. On May the 12th, the Allies began their attack on Narvik and met with some initial success. However, on May the 15th in France, the Germans broke through the French lines, leading to the collapse of the French army in France, making the events in Norway significantly less strategically important, and forcing the British and French commands to make plans for evacuation. However, to help restore morale and to conceal from the Germans their intention to evacuate from Norway, it was decided to press ahead and capture Narvik. On the 28th of May, after heavy fighting, combined French, Norwegian and Polish forces captured Narvik, and by the 8th of June, all Allied troops had been evacuated from Norway. On discovering the Allied evacuation, the Kriegsmarine began a hunt for the evacuation convoy, resulting in the sinking of 2 British destroyers and the aircraft carrier Glorious, while both the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were severely damaged. On June the 10th, the Norwegian forces in Norway surrendered to the Germans. The German casualties during the Norwegian campaign totalled 5,296. The Allied and Norwegian casualties totalled around 6,600, with British losses totalling around 4,350 and French and Polish losses totalling around 530, while total Norwegian losses were around 1,700. The Royal Navy lost 1 aircraft carrier, 2 cruisers, 7 destroyers and a submarine, while the Kriegsmarine lost 2 heavy cruisers, 2 of its 6 light cruisers, 10 of its 20 destroyers and 6 U-boats. However, the Royal Navy at the time was the largest in the world and was able to absorb such losses, unlike those inflicted on the Kriegsmarine, leaving them significantly weakened for the planned invasion of Britain. The Norwegian campaign was a decisive German victory and had secured their supply of iron ore from Sweden. With Norway successfully occupied, the German Luftwaffe were able to attack Scotland and the Royal Navy bases at Scapa Flow and Rosyth more easily. The Kriegsmarine were now free to use Norwegian ports to raid the North Atlantic. And after Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Norwegian ports and airfields were used to attack the Allied Arctic convoys, inflicting heavy losses. The failure of the Norwegian campaign resulted in the resignation of the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and the appointment of Winston Churchill on May the 10th.